Hey there, it's video number 7 in this API series. I had no idea how many it was going to take, but I didn't know it was going to take this many, to be honest with you. In the last one, we talked about some of the API hubs and providers like Blobber and AWS Marketplace and Rapid and Kong. I talked a little bit about Kong. Just to continue, I'm going to look more at Kong to see their pricing is much higher. So again, how does their pricing work? We talked about API pricing in your plans and tiered plans and subscription and endpoint requests, costs and yada yada yada, but we didn't talk about how they charge you, right? So like with Rapid API, the public hub has no subscription, but they charge a flat 20% fee on all of the requests that goes through them. Blobber charges you, they have a couple of different plans. The initial plan is like $100 per month or $99 per month, something like that. You get a certain number of requests, and for every request they take 10% commission, right? So that's their pricing model. Kong, I believe it's like $250 a month or something like that, and I don't know how much exactly they charge for. Oh, by the way, since with Kong, the request may or may not go through them. At least in the plan that I'd initially seen, they may not be a charge at the request level, so it may just be a subscription that you actually purchase with them, right? Like a monthly or an annual subscription. So that's the cost that you have to absorb, and then you charge your consumers, and then you make the profit, right? The margin for the value add that you're bringing to the table, essentially. So pricing is your own strategy. You have to figure out what works, what are the different options you're going to have to be able to provide on different systems, and then onboard your customers, right? So onboarding, offboarding, there are similarities between these systems, but there are differences as well. So it's left to you to how you want to handle them. If you're small and you want to start quick, you may want to publish one endpoint, one API, one endpoint, and one provider. Or if you're like us, you might publish 400 endpoints and like 3 providers, right? It's more power to you. Whatever you think you want to do or your team is capable of, you should lift as much, but don't chew more than you can bite, right? As they say. So that's in terms of the API hubs and provider options that are out there. You get now let's jump gears. Let's go to how you set yourself up on these systems. Most of them support an open API import, whether it's README for documentation or if it's these other providers to publish your endpoints so you can try those endpoints out. You could, as long as you have an open API YAML, you can, I think Swagger Hub is another option as well, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Swagger. So you can import your open API YAML and publish to these systems, and then as long as it's valid open API specification like 2.0 or 3.0, you should be good to go. Some of them also support Postman. So you could use that as well, like importing Postman collections, but be wary because there's bugs all over the place. With Rapid, I don't know whether they've changed the infrastructure or they're making some improvements. I've run into a lot more bugs than I've run into with Rapid in the past. So I've not gotten the sense of stability with their systems, but maybe they're evolving, maybe they've had some challenges that they had to wade through, but I strongly believe they will get past these challenges, right? I have no idea, but I'm hoping and I trust that they will. That's all I can say, right? When I imported it into imported Open API YAML into Rapid, and when I imported the Postman collection, which is identical to Open API, and we'll talk about how you can do transformations between those formats, right? Given the bugs that Rapid has, the documentation that you see after the import happens is actually quite different. There's some glaring differences, right? Like we have in our Open API, we have like titles and description for our endpoints that we enhance after we publish to a lot of these platforms. But we have very basic developer documentation that we publish. When I did that on Rapid using Postman versus Open API, I noticed I think it was with Postman or the other, I can't remember, but I think when I imported the Postman collection, the titles were completely missing, right? It actually used the endpoint path as the title, which if you have 10 endpoints or 20, it's now no biggie, you can go update it. If you have like 400 or 375, 378 like we do, we don't want to do anything manually, right? Everything that we do, not only should our API scale for the end users and consumers as businesses, we want our internal processes and processes, whatever the right way to pronounce that word is, to also scale so we are optimal and efficient as members of the team. So that is this challenge. There's some differences. But most of the other systems didn't have very many bugs, so we were able to import the Open API YAML, and then you can make improvements to the documentation as you go, essentially, right? Or we're going to, like I said, we're going to have rich richly documented endpoints. Rich is a subjective word. As rich as we can and time allows initially, and then we keep improving on it. On README, and the other ones might have some documentation, but just pointing you to README if you want to learn a bit more about what we're doing, right? Because on README, we can add screenshots of snowpile.com, the mobile app, the iOS app, the Android app, the actual web app, maybe the mobile web version. All of those, we can have actual product screenshots, user interface, UI screenshots, code, our code exposed like few lines here and there, so you get context how to consuming these endpoints. Maybe have recipes. You can do whatever you want. There's a gamut of things you could possibly do, and we would be doing as we actually improve and stay focused on our API work this year, right? So that's from a documentation standpoint. Now, to create the Postman, one of the most interesting things that we've done initially was we have a lot of these endpoints. We want to be able to create them on like Postman, publish them initially on the Postman workspace, right? How do we take what we have? We were essentially using Insomnia. Insomnia is great, but they do not respect or conform with the Open API specification. Unfortunately, I have no idea why. There are some tools that do the conversion, but do a very sloppy job. So I don't know. I wish they had a way to convert or publish to Open API spec, but they don't support, not that one I've seen as of the moment of this recording. So we had to do something to actually convert it, right? So here's what we did. We wrote a script that essentially takes our endpoints the way they are right now and actually creates the Postman workspace, right? So it was done not manually but through a script. So every time we make some changes, we run that script. We have our endpoints defined as YAML file. So we have, let's say, the 400 endpoints defined in YAML, in the number of YAML files as endpoint specifications in the code. That code comes into play at runtime as well for actually doing the mappings and transformations and pre and post processing. But the exact same mapping also feeds into the script that can be run when you want to convert, when you're making changes to an endpoint, or you're adding or removing an endpoint, not removing, adding endpoint, or modifying endpoints or whatever. You run the script, so it spits out a Postman JSON, and then we import that into Postman, or there's the NPM plugin that we use, which transforms that Postman JSON. It's got a couple of bugs, but it works for the most part. Transforms that Postman JSON to an Open API YAML, and then we import that Open API YAML into these different API providers. Now, since our script already converts it into Postman, a lot of these systems support Postman. You could choose to do that, but not all of them I've seen support Postman, and not gracefully so. And again, it's not a specification, right? It's very proprietary, right? So we don't want to get logged into that even at that level. So we do all of the transformations using the NPM to the Open API YAML 3.0 specification, and then we import that into these different API providers. That's our process. We do it repeatedly, and it works quite seamlessly. And so whatever improvements we want to make to our documentation, we'll do it after the fact, after we do this import into those systems. At that point, we're going to keep README updated, right? But we're not going to keep because we're going to have more people or other people, non-technical people or partially technical people update this documentation, which means it'll never make its way into the code where the YAML is defined with those endpoints where the initial documentation was. So we are not in a position to re-import this, at least to README, because then we would lose any additional work that was done. So ideally, you want to say that we want to do all of our documentation on the YAML, so this process is repeatable. It is repeatable, but to some extent, right? We don't care for it to be repeatable on this richly documented README site. Maybe everywhere else we can continue to use the process, which we will, but maybe on README we might just import transform a subset of those endpoints. Our code the script actually supports it. You can tell which file to go to, which endpoints or which endpoints to avoid. It only creates the OpenYAML for that, and then we can merge this alongside the other ones that are out there. There's a few things involved there, but we can do it to continually keep our documentation rich and published, right? So that's as far as the documentation is concerned. There's a little bit more, but I'm going to end this video right here. Thank you.